The planet Valorith Prime burned slowly in the cold darkness of Space Ambassador. Thrix stood at the observation window of his orbital station and watched the explosions bloom across his world's shield. Each impact sent ripples of blue energy across the protective barrier, and each ripple was weaker than the one before. The shields would fail in 2 weeks, maybe less. And when they failed, the dominion of the pale sun would reduce his world to ash. 300 warships surrounded his planet. They hung in space like a shell of death, their weapons firing in steady rotation. The dominion did not rush. They did not need to. They had time and numbers and the certainty of victory. Thrix was old, even by the standards of his long-lived species. His carapace had faded from bright green to pale gray over the centuries. He had served the Keth-Ari Collective for 600 years. He had negotiated treaties and prevented wars. He had watched empires rise and fall. He had watched empires rise and fall. But he had never felt fear like this. His people had maintained neutrality for 10,000 years. They traded with everyone and allied with no one. They believed that staying apart from galactic conflicts would keep them safe. They were wrong. The Dominion wanted their world for its strategic position. Nothing more. The Kethari had done nothing to earn this attack. They had committed no offense. They simply occupied space that the Dominion desired. Thrix turned from the window and walked to the communication center. His aides looked up at him with compound eyes full of despair. They had sent messages to every major power in the galaxy. They had begged for help. The responses had destroyed what hope remained. The Silthani Federation expressed deep concern, but could not spare ships. Their own borders required protection. The Orwan Conclave offered prayers and spiritual guidance. The merchant guilds of Tessix would provide weapons and supplies at reasonable prices. Assuming payment could be arranged in advance, no one would fight for them. No one would risk their own safety for a neutral world that had never helped anyone else. There is one more response, his aide said quietly. From the humans. Thrix paused. Humans. He barely knew anything about them. A young species from a distant arm of the galaxy. They had been discovered 40 years ago when galactic scouts found them fighting each other with nuclear weapons on their own. World. Primitive. Violent. Emotional. Depeevsbo. Galactic Council had debated whether to even grant them membership. They were so different from everyone else. What did they say? Thrix asked without hope. His aide's antennae twitched in confusion. They say they are coming. Thrix did not understand. Coming for what purpose? To observe? To offer condolences? No, Ambassador. They are coming to fight. They have dispatched a warship. For a long moment, Thrix could not process this information. It made no sense. The humans owed the Kethari nothing. The two species had never traded, never allied, barely exchanged formal communications. The Dominion fleet was 300 ships strong. What could one human vessel accomplish except its own destruction? Why? Thrix finally asked. His aide could only offer confusion in return. They did not explain. Far across the galaxy, in the Sol system, the U-Unconquered prepared to launch. Admiral Helena Cross stood on the bridge of humanity's greatest achievement. The Unconquered was a dreadnought-class battleship, the first of her kind. She was 2 kilometers long and carried enough firepower to crack a small moon. Her crew of 3,000 was the finest Earth had produced. Her experimental Alcubierre drive could cross the galaxy in weeks, instead of months. She was also alone. The debate in United Earth Command had been fierce. Humanity's fleet was small. They had only 40 warships capable of interstellar combat. Sending their flagship to fight an empire of 300 vessels was suicide. It was a waste of resources. It was strategically foolish. Admiral Cross had listened to every argument. She had heard the generals speak of acceptable losses and strategic priorities. She had watched admirals calculate the cost-benefit ratios of intervention. And then she had spoken. They asked for help, she said simply. That's enough. The room had fallen silent. Cross was 62 years old. She had fought in the Martian Rebellion. She had commanded the defense of the Europa colony when raiders came. She carried scars on her body and heavier ones on her soul. She understood war better than anyone in the room. We don't know these people, a general argued. We gain nothing from this. We gain nothing by staying, Cross replied. But we lose something important. We lose the right to call ourselves good people. We lose the ability to look at ourselves and believe we stand for something more than survival. The vote was close. Cross won by a single margin. Now she stood on her bridge and watched her crew prepare for a journey they might not return from. She had asked for volunteers only. Not a single person had requested transfer. 3,000 humans had chosen to fly toward almost certain death for strangers they had never met. Commander Yusuf Okonkwo approached her station. He was her first officer, a tactical genius, and the closest thing she had to a friend. His dark face was calm, but his eyes held concern. The crew is ready, Admiral, he reported. But I have to ask one more time. Are you certain about this? Cross looked at the view screen. Earth hung in the blackness, blue and green and beautiful. Somewhere out there, a world was dying. Its people were praying for salvation that would never come. Except it would come. It would come in the form of a single ship crewed by stubborn, foolish, impossible humans who could not stand by while innocents suffered. I've never been more certain of anything, Cross said. Take us out, Commander. The Unconquered's engines roared to life. The great ship turned away from Earth and aligned with the distant Velorith system. Her FTL drive began to spin up, bending space around the vessel. All hands, Cross announced over the ship-wide channel. This is Admiral Cross. In a few moments, we will enter FTL toward the Velorith system. We are going to help people we have never met fight an enemy we cannot defeat. Some of us will not return home. She paused and looked around her bridge. Every face was turned toward her. Every expression was resolute. I am proud of each of you. Not because we are brave, but because we are human. And humans do not ignore cries for help. We do not calculate the value of compassion. We do not weigh the worth of strangers. We simply go when we are needed. She nodded to Commander Okonkwo. Engage FTL drive. The stars stretched into lines. The Unconquered vanished from the Sol system in a flash of distorted light. Behind her, Earth continued its slow rotation, unaware that its children had just made a choice that would change the galaxy forever. Ambassador Thrix received the confirmation of the human ship's departure. He stared at the message for a long time, trying to understand. One ship against 300. The strangers. They will die, his aide said softly. They must know this. Thrix nodded slowly. Yes, they know. Then why did they come? Thrix did not have an answer. But somewhere deep in his ancient heart, something stirred. An emotion his species had not felt in millennia. A tiny, fragile spark of hope. The humans were coming. And for reasons he could not explain, that meant something. The journey through FTL space took 3 weeks. 3 weeks of traveling through a tunnel of warped reality, where stars became streaks of light, and time felt strange and heavy. 3 weeks for a crew of 3,000 to prepare for a battle they could not win. Admiral Helena Cross walked the corridors of her ship every day. She visited every section, spoke with every department, learned names she had never known before. She believed that a commander who asked people to die should at least know who they were. She found Chief Engineer Maylin Park in the engine room, surrounded by a chaos of tools and cables. Park was a small woman with gray streaks in her black hair and oil stains on her uniform. She had designed half the systems on the Unconquered herself. The experimental Alcubierre drive was her life's work. How is she holding? Cross asked. Park wiped her hands on a rag and shrugged. The drive is running at 112% efficiency. Technically, that should be impossible. I have decided to stop asking questions. Cross smiled. And when we arrive, I can give you everything you need, Admiral. Weapons, shields, engines. I will keep this ship fighting until there is nothing left to fight with. Park's eyes were steady. I know what we are sailing into. I volunteered anyway. My grandmother survived the Tokyo flood. She used to say that some things matter more than living. I never understood that until now. Cross placed a hand on Park's shoulder. Keep my ship alive, Chief. Always, Admiral. In the forward training area, Lieutenant Commander James Whitehorse drilled his Marines. 500 men and women in combat armor ran combat simulations, practiced boarding actions, trained for every possible scenario. Whitehorse was a large man with a scarred face and calm eyes. He had served in a dozen conflicts and carried the weight of every soldier he had. Lost. Cross watched from the doorway as his Marines fought holographic enemies. They were fast and brutal and efficient. They fought like people who expected to die and wanted to make that death cost something. Whitehorse noticed her and jogged over. Admiral, checking on your ground forces? Checking on all my forces, Cross replied. How are they? Whitehorse looked back at his Marines. A young woman threw a holographic enemy across the room. A pair of soldiers breached a simulated door with perfect coordination. Scared, he admitted. Every one of them. But they are also ready. We have been trained for boarding actions against Dominion vessels. If we get close enough, we can make them bleed. We will get close enough, Cross promised. I will make sure of that. Whitehorse nodded. Then we will do the rest. The mess hall was always busy. 3,000 people required constant feeding, and the cooks worked in endless shifts to keep everyone supplied. Cross sometimes ate with the crew, sitting at random tables, listening to their conversations. She heard stories of families left behind. A young ensign named Sarah Chun was finishing a novel she had been writing for 5 years. She wanted to complete it before they arrived at Valarth. A navigation officer named Rodriguez had left a letter for his daughter to be delivered if he did not return. An engineer named Kowalski played chess with anyone who would face him, saying he wanted to fit in as many games as possible. These were ordinary people. Teachers' children and factory workers' sons. People who had grown up dreaming of space and adventure. None of them had expected to die for strangers on the far side of the galaxy. But none of them had asked to leave. Cross found Commander Okonkwo in the tactical center, studying holographic displays of the Valaris system. 300 Dominion warships glowed red around the pale blue dot of the besieged planet. Their formation was perfect. Their firepower was overwhelming. The display told a simple story. There was no way to win. Still looking for miracles? Cross asked. Okonkwo did not smile. Looking for opportunities. There must be something we can exploit. Some weakness in their formation. Some way to even the odds. And if there is no weakness? Okonkwo finally looked at her. His dark eyes were troubled, but determined. Then we fight anyway. We make them pay for every meter of space. We buy time for the planet's shields to hold. And we show the galaxy that humans do not go quietly. Cross studied the display. 300 ships. Each one designed to kill. The Unconquered was the most powerful vessel humanity had ever built, but she was still just one ship. I keep asking myself if I made the right choice, she admitted. 3,000 lives. The best and bravest Earth has produced. I am leading them to die. No, Okonkwo said firmly. You gave them a choice. They made it themselves. Every person on this ship chose to be here. That matters, Admiral. Maybe it is the only thing that matters. The news of their mission had spread across the galaxy. Other species watched with confusion and mockery. In the halls of the Silthani Federation, officials laughed at human foolishness. In the temples of the Aruan Conclave, priests prayed for the souls of the misguided. In the trading post of Tessex, merchants bet on how long the human ship would survive. One ship against 300. The galaxy had seen desperate acts before, but nothing like this. No species had ever thrown itself into certain death for strangers. It went against every principle of survival, every calculation of benefit. On Valarith Prime, the Kethari watched and waited. Ambassador Thrix received updates on the human ship's progress. He learned that they had named their vessel Unconquered. He found this strange and touching. They believe they cannot be defeated? His aide asked. No, Thrix said slowly. I think they believe that defeat is not the same as failure. They are coming to fight, not to win. The outcome does not matter to them as much as the act itself. His aide's antennae curled in confusion. That makes no sense. Thrix watched another explosion bloom against his world's failing shields. The Dominion fleet continued its patient bombardment. In 12 days, maybe less, the shields would fall. His people would die. But somewhere in the darkness between stars, a human ship was racing toward them. 3,000 strangers who had decided that the Kethari mattered, that their lives were worth fighting for, worth dying for. Perhaps it does not need to make sense, Thrix said softly. Perhaps it only needs to be true. On the final day of travel, Admiral Cross addressed her crew one last time. She stood on the bridge, her voice carried to every corner of the ship, and spoke the words that would echo through history. In 1 hour, we will arrive at the Valarith system. We will face an enemy that outnumbers us 300 to 1. Many of us will not survive the coming battle. I will not lie to you about our chances. She paused, looking at the faces of her bridge crew. They looked back at her with trust and determination. But I want you to know something. Whatever happens today, we have already won. We have proven that humanity will not stand by while innocents suffer. We have shown the galaxy what it looks like when people choose compassion over safety, courage over calculation. Win or lose, live or die, we will be remembered. Not as fools who threw their lives away, but as people who understood that some things are worth any cost. The Unconquered dropped out of FTL at the edge of the Valarith system. Before them, the Dominion fleet filled the viewscreen. 300 ships of gleaming metal and terrible purpose. Cross opened the channel to all frequencies. Her voice was steady and calm. This is Admiral Helena Cross of the United Earthship Unconquered. You have attacked a world that asked for help. We are here to provide it. You have one chance to withdraw. For a long moment, silence. Then the Dominion commander responded with laughter and derision. 50 ships broke from the fleet and accelerated toward the lone. Human vessel Cross closed the channel and looked at her crew. They looked back at her, ready. All hands, battle stations. Let us show them what humans are made of. The Unconquered's engines roared to full power. She surged forward, directly into the approaching enemy fleet. The Battle of Valarith Prime had begun. The galaxy had never seen anything like it. 50 Dominion cruisers descended on the Unconquered in perfect formation, their weapons charged with cold silicon efficiency. Their commanders expected a quick execution, a brief demonstration of what happened to fools who challenged the pale sun. They expected fear and retreat and surrender. They did not expect the humans to accelerate. The Unconquered did not turn. She did not flee. She did not raise shields and hope to survive the opening barrage. Instead, her engines pushed her forward at speeds that should have been impossible. She flew directly into the heart of the enemy formation, like a wolf charging into a pack of hunters. Commander Okonko's voice was calm despite the chaos. Enemy weapons firing. Impact in 12 seconds. Admiral Cross gripped her command chair. Evasive pattern Delta. Return fire with all forward batteries. The Unconquered twisted and rolled through space, her engines screaming against the laws of physics. Enemy beams cut through the void where she had been moments before. Her own weapons roared in response. Human weapons were different from anything the Dominion had encountered. While other species used elegant energy beams and precision strikes, humans had designed their weapons with brutal efficiency. Kinetic accelerators fired tungsten rods at nearly the speed of light. Nuclear missiles streaked toward enemy hulls. Plasma cannons melted through armor with terrible heat. The first Dominion cruiser exploded in a flash of white fire. Then the second. Then the third dot in the command center of the Dominion fleet. The fleet commander watched in shock. His name was Crystalline Patriarch 7, a being of living silicon who had conquered a dozen worlds. He had never lost a battle. He had never faced an enemy who fought like this. "What are they doing?" he demanded. His tactical officer's response was filled with confusion. "They are attacking, Commander, directly into our formation. They are not following any known combat doctrine. That is not possible. No species charges into superior numbers. It is suicide." "Yes, Commander, but they are doing it anyway." On the bridge of the Unconquered, alarms screamed as the ship took its first hits. A beam struck the port side, cutting through 3 decks. Atmosphere vented into space. Crew members died in seconds. Admiral Cross felt the ship shudder beneath her. Damage report. Deck 7 through 9 port section. Hull breach sealed. 32 casualties. 32. 32 of her people gone in an instant. Cross forced the grief down. There would be time to mourn later. If there was a later. Maintain attack pattern. Target their command vessels. The Unconquered spun through the Dominion formation, dealing death with every passing second. She fought like nothing the galaxy had ever witnessed. Other species maintained careful formations, calculated their shots, preserved their resources. Humans fought with fury and creativity, an absolute refusal to accept the obvious outcome. 12 Dominion cruisers were destroyed in the opening engagement. The remaining 38 fell back in disarray, unable to believe what had happened. The fleet commander slammed his crystalline appendage against his command console. "Send 100 more ships. Destroy that vessel." 100 Dominion warships turned from the planetary bombardment and moved to engage the Unconquered. The human ship was already damaged. Smoke and atmosphere leaked from wounds in her hull. Surely she could not survive this, but the Unconquered did not fight to survive. She fought to win time. Admiral Cross made the decision in an instant. "Helm, take us away from the planet. Make them chase us." The ship turned and ran, but it was not retreat. It was strategy. Every Dominion vessel that followed her was one less vessel bombing the planet below. Every minute they spent pursuing her was another minute. The planetary shields could recover. The Unconquered fled across the system, and the Dominion fleet followed. Running battles erupted in the darkness between worlds. The human ship used asteroids for cover, moons for ambush points, the gravity of gas giants to whip around and strike from unexpected angles. 30 more Dominion ships became burning wreckage. The Unconquered paid for every kill with pieces of herself done in engineering. Chief Park worked miracles. She rerouted power from failing systems. She patched holes with emergency materials. She kept weapons firing when the generators were screaming for relief. Her uniform was soaked with sweat, and her hands were burned from hot conduits, but she did not stop. "How long can you keep us fighting?" Commander Okonkwo asked over the com. As long as I have to, Park replied. As long as there is a ship left to fight with. Lieutenant Commander Whitehorse stood ready with his Marines. They waited in the boarding bays, knowing their moment would come. They could not fire the big guns or pilot the ship, but they could fight in ways no one expected. When the Admiral gets us close enough, Whitehorse told his people, we are going to board an enemy vessel. We are going to take their ship and turn their own guns against them. No one has ever done this before. We are going to be the first. His Marines checked their weapons and nodded. They were scared. They were ready. The battle raged for 6 hours. The Unconquered became a legend in those hours. She destroyed 80 Dominion vessels through skill and fury and sheer refusal to die. But she was dying all the same. Half her decks were in vacuum. A quarter of her crew was dead or wounded. Her shields flickered and failed, and reformed and failed again. Her weapons fired slower as power systems collapsed. She had given everything she had to give. Admiral Cross sat in her command chair, wounded and bleeding. A beam had struck the bridge an hour ago. Her left arm was useless, held in a makeshift sling. Burns covered the right side of her face. She had refused evacuation. She would not leave her chair while her crew still fought. Admiral, Commander Okonkwo said quietly, they are surrounding us. The view screen showed the truth. 120 Dominion ships formed a sphere around the crippled Unconquered. There was nowhere to run. No tricks left to play. The battle was ending. Cross nodded slowly. Open a channel. All frequencies. Her voice was tired but steady as she broadcast to the galaxy. This is Admiral Helena Cross of the Unconquered. We are damaged beyond repair. We will not survive much longer. But I want the Dominion and everyone watching to understand something. She paused, looking at the faces of her surviving bridge crew. They looked back at her without fear. You wanted a single ship? Now you have 120 vessels focused on us instead of that planet. Every minute we survived, their shields recovered. Every minute we fought, their people lived. We came when they called. That is what humans do. The Dominion fleet commander laughed across the open channel. You have accomplished nothing. Your ship is destroyed. You will die. And then we will finish what we started. Perhaps, Cross replied. But you will remember this day. You will remember that 3,000 humans held off 300 of your ships for 6 hours. And you will wonder what happens when we come back with more. The fleet commander cut the channel and ordered the final assault. The Dominion ships prepared to fire dot, and then the sensors detected something impossible. Multiple FTL signatures. Incoming. Dozens of them. The Dominion commander checked his readings. Reinforcements? But from where? The signatures resolved into ships. 47 vessels of varied design. Some were elegant and curved, the ships of the HFY Federation. Others were heavy and practical, the vessels of the Oruan Conclave. There were merchant guild escorts and ships from species that had not been seen in generations. Ameguan merchant guild escorts and ships from species that had not been seen in generations. New voice broadcast across all frequencies. It belonged to Admiral Thyssen of the HFY Federation. Dominion Fleet, this is the Allied Relief Force. We have been watching this battle for hours. We have seen what one human ship can do. If they can die for strangers, we can at least stand beside them. More ships dropped out of FTL. 60, 80, over 100 vessels from across the galaxy. Summoned by shame and inspired by courage. The fleet commander stared at his tactical display in disbelief. This was impossible. The galactic powers never intervened. They never risked themselves for others, but they were here, because a single human battleship had reminded them what courage looked like. Admiral Cross watched the Allied fleet arrive, and felt tears running down her wounded face. "All hands," she whispered into the cum. "We are no longer alone." The Unconquered's weapons charged one more time. Around her, 100 Allied ships formed up for battle. The Dominion was still stronger. The outcome was still uncertain. But for the first time in hours, hope was no longer impossible. The battle was not over. The Allied fleet struck from behind like a hammer against glass. The Dominion formation, already spread thin from chasing the Unconquered, shattered under the unexpected assault. Sylphani destroyers sliced through the enemy rear guard. Our ruined cruisers crashed into the Dominion flanks. Merchant Guild escorts, designed for defense but armed for war, filled the void with weapons fire. Fleet Commander Crystalline Patriarch 7 had never known panic. His species did not experience emotions the way organic beings did. But as he watched his perfectly ordered battle dissolve into chaos, he felt something close to fear. "All ships, reform on my position," he commanded. "We can still—" A salvo from the dying Unconquered struck his communication array. The fleet commander's orders reached only half his ships. The rest fought without guidance, without coordination. They fought and they died. On the bridge of the Unconquered, Admiral Cross watched the battle turn. Her ship was barely functioning. 17% operational capacity. Most of her weapons were silent. Her engines produced just enough power to hold position. But she could still fight. "Target their command vessels," she ordered. "Every shot we have. Empty the magazines." The Unconquered's remaining weapons fired in a final burst of fury. 2 Dominion command ships disappeared in flames. The enemy fleet, already breaking, began to retreat. But the humans were not finished. Lieutenant Commander Whitehorse led 42 Marines through the airlock of a captured boarding pod. Their target was the Dominion command carrier that still coordinated the remaining enemy ships. The plan was simple. Board the vessel, capture it, turn its guns against its allies. No species had ever attempted an interstellar boarding action. The Dominion did not prepare for it because they believed no one would be foolish enough to try. The Marines crashed through the carrier's hull and fought their way through corridors designed for silicon beings 3 times their size. Dominion soldiers swarmed to meet them. 800 against 42. Whitehorse fought at the front. His powered armor was dented and scorched. His rifle grew hot from constant firing. Behind him, his Marines died one by one. 28 fell in the first 10 minutes. Then 30. Then 36. But they kept moving forward. They did not stop. Whitehorse reached the bridge with 6 Marines still standing. The Dominion commander tried to flee. Whitehorse caught him. The fight was brief and brutal. "This is Lieutenant Commander Whitehorse of the United Earth Marines," he broadcast on the captured ship's systems. "This vessel is now under human control. Dominion fleet, your commander has fallen. Your command ship belongs to us. Withdraw now or watch us use your own weapons against you." For a long moment, nothing happened. Then the Dominion fleet began to run. Ships turned and fled, abandoning their formation, abandoning their mission, abandoning their pride. The mighty Dominion of the Pale Sun retreated in chaos. 140 Dominion vessels remained as wreckage. The rest fled into the darkness of space. The battle was over. The Unconquered drifted without power, a broken shell that had once been humanity's greatest ship. Of her 3,000 crew, 912 still lived. Emergency lights flickered in damaged corridors. Wounded sailors called for help. Engineers worked to keep life support running a few more hours. Admiral Cross refused to leave her chair until rescue vessels arrived. Her injuries were severe, but she would not abandon her people. She sat in the darkness of her dying bridge and listened to the reports coming in. Victory. They had won. The planet was saved. The cost was terrible. 2,088 humans dead. More than two-thirds of her crew, the finest people Earth had ever produced, gone in the span of hours. Cross wept in the darkness. She wept for them all. 3 days later, Ambassador Thrix boarded the Unconquered. The Cathari elder moved slowly through the damaged corridors. He saw the burn marks on the walls. He saw the sealed bulkheads that marked sections open to space. He saw humans working to repair their wounded ship, exhausted and grieving, but still moving forward. He found Admiral Cross in the medical bay. She sat beside a bed where a young ensign slept, recovering from severe burns. The Admiral's arm was in a proper cast now. Her face had been treated, but still showed the marks of battle. "Admiral Cross," Thrix said softly. Cross looked up. Her eyes were tired but clear. "Ambassador, welcome aboard. I'm sorry we cannot offer better hospitality." Thrix studied her for a long moment. This was the woman who had brought her ship across the galaxy to save strangers. This was the leader who had sacrificed 2,000 lives for people she had never met. Why? Thrix asked. It was the question that had haunted him since this began. "You owed us nothing. You gained nothing. Why did you come?" Cross considered the question carefully. Behind her, the wounded ensign stirred in her sleep. "Because you asked," Cross said simply. "And because the galaxy needs to remember something it has forgotten." What has it forgotten? That we are all just people. Different shapes, different worlds, different histories. But we are all trying to survive in a universe that is trying to kill us. If we do not help each other, what is the point of any of it? Thrix had no response to this. His species had spent 10,000 years staying apart from the galaxy's troubles. They had believed that neutrality was wisdom. They had been wrong. The young ensign woke. She looked up and saw Thrix with confusion that slowly became recognition. Her face was still marked by burns, but she managed a weak smile. "Ambassador," she said, "is your world okay? Did we save them?" Thrix felt something crack inside him. This child, this wounded young human, was asking about his people. After everything she had suffered, her first thought was for strangers. "Yes," he said softly. "Your people saved them. All of them." The ensign's smile widened. "Good. That is good." She closed her eyes and slept again. Cross watched the ensign with something like pride. "That is why we came, Ambassador. Because we want to live in a galaxy where people help each other. And the only way to create that galaxy is to be the kind of people who help." Thrix reached into his robes and removed a small object. It was a Cathari of Promise Stone, carved from the heart rock of his world. His species had given these to only a handful of beings in their long history. "This is for you," he said, pressing it into the Admiral's good hand. "You have earned a place among our guardians. You have earned more than I can ever repay. But more than that, you have reminded the galaxy what courage looks like." Cross accepted the stone. Its surface was warm against her palm. "We are not especially brave, Ambassador. We are just stubborn." "Perhaps," Thrix said. "But sometimes stubborn is the same thing as brave." The story of the Unconquered spread across the galaxy like wildfire. Species that had ignored each other for millennia began to talk. Old enemies considered new alliances. Isolated worlds reached out to their neighbors. The dominion of the Pale Sun retreated behind their borders and did not emerge for 40 years. The shame of their defeat was too great to face. On Valorith Prime, the Cathari began to rebuild. But they did not rebuild alone. Human engineers worked beside Cathari architects. Silthani doctors treated Cathari wounded. Ships from a dozen species brought supplies and aid. The Unconquered remained in orbit for 3 months while repairs were made. Cathari engineers studied human technology with amazement. Human engineers learned ancient Cathari techniques. Two species that had never spoken before became something like friends. When the Kansinzen, unconquered, finally prepared to return to Earth, crowds of Cathari gathered to watch. They sang songs of gratitude in voices like wind through crystals. They waved farewell to the humans who had saved them. Admiral Cross stood at the observation window and watched the planet grow smaller. She held the Promise Stone in her hand. "Do you think it will last?" Commander Okonkwo asked. "This new spirit of cooperation?" Cross thought about the question. She thought about all the crew members who would never see Earth again. She thought about the young ensign who had asked about strangers before herself. She thought about the Allied fleet that had come because they were ashamed to stay behind. "I do not know," she admitted. "But we showed them it was possible. We showed them what they could be. That has to count for something." The Unconquered's engines powered up. The great ship turned toward the stars of Home Dot behind her. A galaxy began to remember how to hope. 10 years had passed since the Battle of Valarth Prime. The galaxy had transformed in ways no one had predicted. The Valorith Accords, named for the battle that inspired them, had created the first true interspecies alliance in galactic history. 23 species had signed. More joined every year. The principle that bound them together was simple. When someone asks for help, you answer. Earth had become something unexpected. Not the military power of the galaxy. Not the wealthiest or most advanced. But somehow, humanity had become its moral center. When debates stalled in the council chambers, delegates looked to the human representatives. When crises erupted on distant worlds, people asked what the humans would do. It was not because humans were better than other species. They were not stronger or smarter or more virtuous. But they had proven something that mattered. They had shown that a single ship, crewed by stubborn fools who refused to accept the obvious, could change everything. The Unconquered still flew. Her hull bore scars from the battle that could not be fully erased. Her crew was different now, a mix of humans and Cathari and a dozen other species. But her mission remained the same. She flew toward trouble. She answered calls for help. She was the first ship many desperate worlds saw when they thought hope was lost. Admiral Helena Cross had retired from active command. At 72, her body had finally demanded rest. She walked with a limp from injuries that never fully healed. She refused to have it fixed. "Reminders are important," she said to anyone who asked. Now she served as humanity's ambassador to the Valorith Accords. She sat in council meetings and spoke of cooperation and compassion. She visited worlds that had joined the Alliance and worlds that were considering it. Everywhere she went, people stared at her with something like awe. She hated that. "I am just a person," she told them. "I made a choice." Anyone could have made this same choice. But that was exactly why they stared. Because she was just a person. Because the choice was available to anyone. Because she had made it when others did not. On the Unconquered, a young Cathari named Vel prepared for her first day of duty. She was the first non-human to serve on a human vessel. Her carapace was bright green, marking her youth. Her compound eyes reflected the light of human technology she was only beginning to understand. She had grown up on stories of the battle. Every Cathari child knew the tale of the human ship that came when no one expected aid. Vel had decided at a young age that she wanted to be like those humans. She wanted to be the kind of person who answered when someone called. Her interview had been conducted by Admiral Yusuf Okonkwo himself. He was older now, gray in his beard and lines on his face. But his eyes were the same, calm and thoughtful and kind. "Why do you want to serve on a human ship?" he had asked. Vel considered her answer carefully. The Cathari were not good at expressing emotions the way humans did. But she tried. "Because when my world burned, your people came. My mother watched the Unconquered fly into battle. She told me about it every year on the anniversary. She said that until that day, she did not believe anyone in the galaxy cared whether we lived or died. Then she saw your ship, and she knew she was wrong. She paused, searching for the right words. I want to be the kind of person who answers when someone calls. I want to show others what your people showed us. That helping strangers is worth any cost. Okonkwo had studied her for a long moment. Then he smiled. Welcome to the unconquered Ensign Vel. Now she stood on the bridge of the legendary ship, surrounded by humans and Ketheri and others. The view screen showed the stars of a system she had never visited. The ship hummed with power and purpose around her. A message arrived on the command channel. Priority alert. Emergency transmission from the far edge of the galaxy. The bridge crew fell silent as the message played. A species called the Thanari, who had never been contacted by the galactic community, was facing extinction. Their sun was dying, collapsing faster than their scientists had predicted. They had no FTL technology. They had no way to escape. They would all die within a month. They were not members of the Valorith Accords. They had no alliances or treaties. By every law and custom, they were not the galaxy's problem. The message ended. The bridge was quiet. They do not even know we exist, someone said. They sent that message hoping anyone would hear. Admiral Okonkwo stood at the command station, his hands clasped behind his back. He looked at the star chart, at the distant system where millions of beings waited to die. Open a channel to the council, he ordered. The debate in the Valorith Accords was fierce. Some delegates argued that the Thanari were not part of the community. Resources were limited. The journey was long. Why should anyone help strangers who had never helped anyone else? The human delegation listened to every argument. Then Ambassador Cross spoke. She was old now, her hair white and her face lined with years. But her voice was still strong. She did not raise it. She did not need to. 10 years ago, my ship flew to Valorith Prime. We were not part of any alliance. We had no treaties with the Kethari. By every calculation, their survival was not our problem. She paused, looking around the council chamber. But we went anyway, because someone asked for help. Because we believe that helping others is never wasted, even when it costs everything. She pulled out the promise stone that Ambassador Thrix had given her a decade ago. It still gleamed in the light. The Thanari have not asked for help because they do not know help exists. But they are going to learn today that they are not alone. That is what this alliance was built to do. That is what we all signed up for. If we cannot help strangers, what is the point of any of it? The vote was close, but it passed. 200 ships launched toward the dying system. Human vessels and Ketheri vessels and ships from a dozen other species. The largest relief fleet in galactic history, assembled in days because a distant world needed help. The Unconquered led the formation. On her bridge, Ensign Vel watched the stars stream past in FTL transit. She was young and scared and proud. She was exactly where she wanted to be. Admiral Okonkwo opened a channel to the fleet. All ships, this is the Unconquered. We do not know these people. They do not know us. They have not asked for help because they do not know help exists. But they are going to learn today that they are not alone. All ships, maximum speed. Let us go introduce ourselves. Across the galaxy, on 100,000 worlds, beings of every shape and size heard the news. They heard about the fleet racing to save strangers. They heard about the Thanari who did not know rescue was coming, and they remembered. They remembered the story of a single battleship that roared through the void when no one expected aid. They remembered that humans had come when everyone else refused. They remembered that sometimes the smallest light in the darkness is enough to remind everyone that the darkness can be fought. The Unconquered dropped out of FTL at the edge of the Thanari system. Behind her, 200 ships followed. Before her, A dying sun flickered with the last of its light. On the planet below, the Denari looked up at the sky and saw ships appearing like stars being born. Ships they had never seen before. Ships from species they never knew existed. They had sent their message without hope. They had expected to die alone in the cold. Instead, the galaxy had answered. Admiral Okonkwo opened a channel to the planet. His voice carried across space, the first words the Denari would ever hear from another species. People of the Denari, this is the United Earthship Unconquered, leading the Valarth Accord's relief fleet. We received your message. We are here to help. You are not alone. You were never alone. Far away, in her office on Earth, Admiral Helena Cross watched the transmission with tears in her eyes. She clutched the promise stone that had been her companion for 10 years. She remembered the fear of those first moments at Valorth. She remembered the faces of the crew members who did not survive. She remembered asking herself if any of it mattered. Now she had her answer. The Unconquered hung in the light of a dying sun, surrounded by all eyes from across the galaxy, preparing to save people they had never met. And on the planet below, millions of beings looked up at the stars and learned that the universe was not as cold as they had believed. That was the legacy of humanity. Not conquest or power or wealth. Simply this: when someone needs help, you go. When someone calls out in the darkness, you answer. The galaxy had remembered how to hope. And it would never forget again.